Today we're going to cover strings and string methods. Okay, so just as a reminder, a string in Python is a series of characters. Anything that's inside a quote mark is considered a string, so you can either use a double or single quote marks to wrap around your string to identify it to a computer as objects that are not numbers or they're not Booleans. So for instance, by the way, this answers the question number 1 and number 2 in your notes up here. So for instance, if I say print, this is a string, and I use double quotes, that's considered a string. Or I can use single quotes to wrap around a string to identify it as a string. So I can use either double or single, but I have to use them as a pair. If I start with a double, then I must end with a double. Same with a single. Okay, the output, this is a string, and so it outputs as, it just displays everything inside the double quotes or everything inside the single quotes. All right, the first big idea that we're going to go over is the input function. Now, this answers, we're moving on to question 4. I'm going to go back to question 3 in a minute. I misordered them in the notes here. So the input function allows a user to type something in. So if I use the prompt input, that is a function that Python recognizes, and it creates a space for a user to type in information. And this information that's in between the double quotes, this string, is what appears on the screen for the user. So the only thing they're going to see is the question, what's up? Now this first line one, it's when someone types something in, it doesn't go anywhere. It just disappears after they type it in because it's not being stored in a variable. If you want to change that, so right here, this input, what is your name? When someone types that in, it's going to be stored back in the variable name. Okay, so someone generates, so that they get a question, they answer the question, and as soon as they get an answer, the answer is stored in the variable name. Now this line 2, we're going to come to see, this is called concatenation, and this, so line 2 is going to print out hi plus whatever the person stored in it. So if you say, what is your name, Michael, and it would print out hi, Michael. Big idea number 2 is type coercion. Okay, so this is a way to change the data type that the computer reads the data as. So if I wanted to store integers as strings, one method that I could use is to put quotation marks around the integers so that they are identified by the computer as non-numbers. So for instance, if I wanted to actually print out this addition problem, what I would do is I would put quotes around these this whole addition problem, and the output would just be the same thing all again. It wouldn't actually perform the addition problem because the things inside are not viewed as numbers. They are viewed as strings. Okay, another way to convert data types into other types of data are to use the functions str or int, the string or the int function. So if I use the string function, what I can do is I can put a number inside of it, and it will create a string out of that number. So instead of that number being 5, it will be considered 5, which is the string version, right? So it's not going to, so when it's a string, we no longer have arithmetic operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. We can't do that on things that are non-numbers. There are certain reasons why you'd want to do that. It may not be evident to you right now, but just hang on to this method in case you need it. If you put something that's already a string into the string function, it doesn't do anything with it. It just keeps it as a string. You can also use the int function to turn a number that is a string into an actual number, an int. So you use int and then you put the object inside of it. That's really important to know because any number you get back from the input function is stored automatically as a string, and then you can't add or subtract it with anything else because it's stored as text or a non-number, and so you have to wrap it in the int function in order to make it be able to have operations defined on it. Finally, if you put a string inside of the int function, you'll get an error because you're not allowed to make things that are letters into numbers. Okay, big idea number 3, escape characters. Now let's say, for instance, I'm going to jump to this. Let's say that you want the quote to actually print out in your print statement. So you want the quotation marks to actually print out. What one trick is you can start the quotes, these single quotes, you can start the string with single quotes and then use double quotes. So the double quotes will be present in the display inside of the print function. So you use a single quote to start and end the string. This is for your notes at the very bottom of the first page. and then you use double quotes here to start the quotation marks. So this ends up printing like this. It doesn't print the single quote marks, but it does print the double quote marks. Another way to escape, it's called escaping, using escape character. So it really escapes the end of the string. So let's say that you start a string with a single quotation mark, not a double, and you have an apostrophe in your string. You can use a backslash before the apostrophe, and that will, notice that Replit has colored this in blue. So if you do that, it will end up looking like the way that you want it to. It will print the apostrophe because it will recognize that that is not a symbol that's not a symbol that ends your string. It is merely a symbol that's part of the things that you want printed. Okay, there's some other things that you can do with strings called string methods. So one of them is a method of making a string all uppercase. Okay, it doesn't seem very exciting, but it's actually pretty important. So let's say that you had, well, let me just go back. The name of the method is the upper method, right? So it's upper with open and closed parentheses. So if you have the name of a variable here, you would just call the upper method on that. You use dot notation, which is you say the name of the variable, then you put a dot, and then you put the name of the method. So Python uses dot notation all the time in order to perform something. So you say upper, which is the name of the method, and then there's actually nothing that you add in these parentheses here. Sometimes the parentheses need more information to do their work. That information would be provided inside the parentheses. This method does not need additional information, so the parentheses are left empty. So let me give you an example of what an input would be. So in your notes, you are going to write this in your chart, but instead of writing my name, you're going to write your name. So I created a variable called name, and I gave it the string Dr. Quint. And I asked it to print name.upper. So it's going to look back into what is stored in the variable name. So it's going to look at Dr. Quint, and it's going to perform the upper method on it. Now notice there are open and closed parentheses here, which is a little strange, but that's because it's part of the method. And this closed parentheses is part of the print statement. So the statement just prints out as my name, all in uppercase. Nothing really crazy. The next method is the lowercase method, and as you might assume, you could just say whatever the variable name is, dot lower, open and close parentheses. So again, if the input was my name, I would say name dot lower, and it would print out my name, all in lowercase. Okay, this is a method called title case. So title case capitalizes the first letter of each word. So if I say name.title, it doesn't really change that much because this was already titled case, but if it were all lowercase before, it would change the D and the Q into uppercase. So remember, as you take your notes, you're writing your own name in there and generating your own output. I should not see my name in your notes. I should see your name. Okay, the big idea number 4 is the use of something called concatenation. Now, what concatenation is it's the ability to add strings together. Now, they don't add in the sense that we use addition in algebra, for instance. They just place right next to each other. So the code would be, if you have a variable stored in string underscore 1 and the variable stored in string underscore 2, you would just use a plus symbol in between them. So for instance, if I have first name would be, or first underscore name is the string Ada. Last underscore name would be the string Lovelace. By the way, Ada Lovelace is considered the first computer scientist or the first computer programmer. She programmed hundreds of years ago without an actual modern day computer, but she had a machine that she wrote instructions for. So if you said print first name underscore title plus last name underscore title, this plus is going to add in the first name and the last name together. So it's going to print next to each other. The first name will be, the title will capitalize the A, the title method will capitalize the L in this case, and so you get Ada Lovelace. Now the question is, what if you want a space in between the first and the last names? What should you do? Okay, so in order to do that, instead of printing this code, instead of coding for that, you want to add a space into it by using concatenation with a white space. So to get white space, you do a quote and a white space here and another quote, and that creates a space right there, but using plus signs on either side. And that will print her first and her last name with a space in between. Finally, the last big idea to cover is the string formatting idea. So in string formatting, what you want to do is, instead of using concatenation, which can get really cumbersome if you have a long statement, what you want to do instead is you want to use things like these curly braces to store as placeholders. And then what you do is, after you finish your string, so right now it says blank, Mr. Blank, may I call you blank. So after you close your string, you want to use a dot format method, which will replace greeting with hello, and hello gets put into this placeholder here. So say hello, Mr., and then it will look, okay, the next one to replace is whatever stored in the variable named last. So that is Freeman. So hello, Mr. Freeman, may I call you, and then first is the string Morgan, may I call you Morgan. So it prints out, so just again, those three things are the values that are stored in the variables will be replaced, and the order matters here. So greeting is the first placeholder, last is replaced in the second one, and first in the last one. And it will, so it'll print out like this: hello, Mr. Freeman, may I call you Morgan? Okay, and that is the end of the lesson. We just have the checks for understanding left. So go ahead and answer the 3 checks for understanding, and check with me in order to get the answers for these checks for understanding. Okay, if you are watching the video and you are not in my class, I'm just going to show the checks for understanding on the screen so that you can see them. Pause them, get your answer, and then return back to the screen. So this is the first one. How would you print out this right here? Which of these lines of code would you use? The second one is, what is the outcome of running the code below? Okay, so this is the code, and which one of these is the outcome? Right? The answer for this one, or the question for this one, is how would you print out this statement? The Evil Dead is my favorite movie. What would you use as your lines of code? And finally, what would be the outcome of this little program here? All right, and that's it.